Welcome to the Chelsea Fans Channel. There is some very, very big news breaking, and that news involves the prodigal son's return. We're fortunate enough to welcome Dan Levine into the studio. And Dan, I could not be more excited about this news. It's very, very good. Didier Drogba could be returning to Stamford Bridge.
Could be. Hold just there for a second, but it looks very likely to happen.
That's fantastic news.
What the latest is that it all seems to be over bar the shouting. You know, Drogba's camp are very, very coy about this. Chelsea are very coy about this. Montreal Impact, who he plays for at the moment, have been telling anybody who wants to know that it seems to be more or less happening. So it looks like we could have our hero of Munich back.
This is such good news because it was when we lost people like Drogba and Petr Cech. There's a few examples that the team's spirit seems to be less galvanised. Yeah,
attitude. Yeah.
Do you feel like that could come back with Didier?
Well, that's clearly the plan, isn't it? They seem to know at Chelsea that a lot of the passion, a lot of the character has gone out of the dressing room. And Didier, I think, during his last year, when Chelsea won the league, was more about just being a player who went on, looked like not a great forward and defended fairly well in some games. He was more about sort of being Mourinho's lieutenant on the pitch and in training, putting the arm around people, sort of translating what the manager means to players and being a real sort of big character and being just a guy who almost is a coach, and that seems to be what his role is intended to be.
Wonderful. You can't underestimate the importance of that character, can you?
That's exactly right. And having been around Drogba a lot over the last few years, being lucky enough to be with him throughout both of his stints with Chelsea, you notice very, very clearly that when he comes in a room, he's the biggest guy in there. And I don't just mean physically, he's obviously a huge, huge guy, but in terms of personality, you can have anyone in that room. You can have players, you can have journalists, the sort of people he mixes with, of course. You can have world leaders, and he still seems to be the biggest personality, the biggest character in the room. And that rubs off on other people,
There's something saintly almost about them, isn't there?
Well, it's ethereal. A funny way. Yeah, it is a funny way of putting it, but it's not far from it. It's remarkable to see. And, the way he, having been in the tunnel at Stamford Bridge many times, when he comes down, and you can see everyone wants to talk to Didier. You're even sort of people who run the club. They seem to be almost putting his hands, and he has a real positive effect.
Yeah,
and that's what they're after.
And he'll be coming back. I think I know the answer to this, but just to be sure, because it was only a year or so ago that he's scoring goals at Chelsea, scoring goals at Old Trafford. He's not coming back. We're desperate for a striker. We've got Falcao at the moment. I'm convinced that Didier Drogba will do a better job than Falcao. Didier Drogba is coming back not as a player. Not as a player.
L'Équipe, the French sports newspaper, ran a story this week saying that he'd announced his retirement from football. They're jumping the gun a little bit, but it seems to be that Montreal Impact are expecting that to be the case. And that when he comes back to Chelsea, it's going to be as a coach. He hasn't got his badges, of course, but it looks like that's the progression. They're going to take them through these badges, going to take him all the way through, and who knows, maybe a manager of the future for Chelsea.
Well, that's exactly what I was just going to ask you, Dan. He is such a big man, and such a huge part of our history and who we are, actually, and part of our identity. You've been fortunate enough to meet him and know him on a more personal level, certainly than I do. Do you feel that he has the minerals to become a manager in the future?
I honestly believe that he's got the minerals to do anything he wants to do in life. He's just one of those guys who, if he decides he wants to achieve peace in Ivory Coast, then he'll go out and do that. If he wanted to join the United Nations, one imagines he probably would, and I think he probably will as well. There's a good chance he might be a peace and goodwill ambassador.
He's a humanitarian, isn't he?
He's already got some sort of role, hasn't he?
Yeah.
If he turns his mind to it and he fancies it, then I can't see why he wouldn't be a big, successful manager, and Chelsea is the ideal place.
What a story that would be. The King of Munich returns to Chelsea to guide us to Champions League
I would love that.
victory.
Can you imagine Drogba sat in the dugout, overseeing a successful Chelsea team?
Yeah, he's a very intelligent man, isn't he? He's very articulate. He has the makeup of a manager.
Certainly intelligent, speaks very well in, of course, a number of languages, and also sort of has the air of a statesman around him. And this is one of the things I think that was successful last time. Because he went away and came back, he started off as one of the lads, but he's been elevated to this higher level. And people have got this incredible respect for him.
He's got that gravitas not only from his personality, like we've been talking about, but in footballing terms. He's been there, he's done it. and he can be that inspiring character, can't he? I've been in a Champions League final. I've
Yeah.
scored the winning goal.
Been sent off in the Champions League final.
Listen to me. I can show you the way.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, his record in other ways speaks for itself. The number of finals he's played in, and he's scored in.
Yes.
And that just tells you this is a guy who knows how to turn things on when it's needed.
Big occasion person.
We often forget Drogba could be very, very frustrating a lot of the time. When he was on the pitch, he wasn't always the Lion of Munich that we remember him as.
In the very early days, I remember him getting booed by Chelsea fans for diving. When he was very, very new.
There was that moment with
the
Jens
English
Lehmann,
game.
wasn't there? It was that appalling moment with Jens Lehmann at Stamford Bridge in front of the Matthew Harding end, where they were sort of both dominoing each other for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, but he learned his lesson, and he knew, that Chelsea supporters didn't want to see. We wanted to see him using his attributes. The strength and all that he then, over the rest of his career at Chelsea displayed, didn't he? Like, he realised that he wasn't going to get anywhere rolling around and diving as he might have done on the continent. And then that's when we got to see the real Didier Drogba.
Perfect archetypal centre forward.
Probably the best.
Do you know, when you think about it at the moment, right? You've got Pep Guardiola has done wonderful things, progressing straight into management. You've got Diego Simeone, who's the prodigal son of Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
It feels like this is the natural progression to somebody coming through, and Didier Drogba could well be the next manager to kind of continue on from the club that he played for.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think the days of footballers have changed an awful lot. The footballers we've got now have grown up with player power. They've all been a part of the celebrity culture from a very young age. They know nothing else. And the days, Fergie wrote about it in his book about how it was very, very difficult towards the end because there'd been a generational shift between players. That him as an old guy found it very difficult to relate to a lot of these people. And so someone like Drogba, someone like Guardiola, and so on, it makes more sense. It's like I think the difference between sort of Generation X and Generation Y. You've got people now who want to know why they need to be doing things and need that sort of. They need to see somebody in front of them who's done it all and has the gravitas to tell them, and that's why I think a lot of this is happening.
He's the perfect man for that as well, isn't he? He really is. I think it was very funny actually. You mentioned the different generations there. I remember reading something that happened to Frank Lampard when he was on international duty, and he was having a chat. Frank Lampard was on international duty with England and was having a chat with Callum Chambers. Frank Lampard happened to mention Tony Adams. And Callum Chambers hadn't heard of him, and that was the moment.
Oh my God, really?
Callum Chambers, the defender for Arsenal, hadn't heard of Tony Adams, and that was
Really?
Frank Lampard's.
That's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, but Frank Lampard, that was his moment to go. Do you know what? I need to retire from international football. I've got nothing in common with this guy. But you do need somebody to bridge that gap, don't you? You need somebody, and Drogba's a perfect man because a lot of the crop coming through, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, for example, his hero would have been Didier Drogba. It couldn't be a better person to look up to. This.
I'm getting quite excited about this. If this is a potential.
Calm. First of all, we've got a guy here. Yes, there's great potential there, but he hasn't got his badges. He's got no experience as a coach at all. Not in the way that managers have. Okay, he's done the arm around the shoulder. And he's probably handed the bibs out and probably led people in a bit of a team hug. But this is a long, long way in the future. But it's the first step potentially. So there's good reason to be excited.
How much of a pain is it to get? What does getting your badges mean? Is that a long process? I don't know exactly. I know players go and get their badges, but I've no idea if that's a problem or. We're going to be be looking for a manager in a few months, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it won't be Didier.
Am I getting ahead of myself?
You are a little bit, yeah. It takes a while to get badges, even on an accelerated process. We're looking maybe not the next manager, certainly not. Maybe not the manager after next. Maybe the one after next.
Right. Okay.
Which in Chelsea terms,
a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Not very long.
Maybe we might start him off as a youth manager, perhaps, and then. Let him work his way up internally.
I think what they really, really want from him at the moment is his input on a first-team basis.
Right.
I think that they really need somebody there who can create that atmosphere of just winningness, around the camp and just that ambition to do better that seems to have been lacking a bit of late.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's really what's needed at first-team level.
We saw a nice image on, I think it was John Terry's Instagram account last week. Before the Palace game, and it was a little sort of like a little cartoon that was put up, and it was him hugging Frank Lampard.
Yeah.
And
misses his mates.
Yeah, it was like it's time. I woke up this morning realising I really miss my mates or something like that, And you can imagine John Terry hearing the news that Didier Drogba might be back to help him out in the change rooms in terms of being the elder statesman.
Yeah.
I bet that was music to his ears.
I would have thought so, yeah. Big mates, those guys. And everyone, I don't know anybody within the Chelsea setup over the last few years who's got a bad thing to say about Drogba. He's no saint, I'm not saying that, we're not elevating him to some mythical figure here. But and obviously his character has many different sides. But everyone sees something positive in him. And that's very rare, I think.
Well, do you know what? Again, I'm probably being slightly too optimistic, but I've got to ask you, Dan. I'm a huge fan of Eden Hazard. And it's all the signs are looking like he's going to be going to join one of his heroes, presumably Zinedine Zidane. One of his heroes could be coming back. Do you feel like Didier Drogba's presence could help us keep hold of our talisman?
Well, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because certainly Drogba was, I think Hazard saw as his biggest mate at Chelsea.
Oh, really?
They were very, very close indeed.
That's interesting, isn't it? I didn't know that.
And it does look, from happy face down to sad face.
Yeah.
It does look highly likely, almost inevitable, I think, that Real Madrid are going to come in for Hazard now, with Zinedine Zidane being the manager there. He's been, let's not say tapping him up, but he's been
very vocal, hasn't he?
He has been him for a long time.
An awful lot. And I think one of the big things with Hazard is that he wants to do the very best he can for Eden Hazard. It's not to say he's not a team player, but he wants to be the best player in the world. He wants to win the Ballon d'Or. He's fairly open about that. The question that's always been there is whether he can do that with Chelsea, and whether he needs the Champions League under his arm in order to win the Ballon d'Or. Now, of course, you look at the players that win it generally, they're all in Spain, aren't they? Because they go out, they have great big open spaces, they can do what they like out there. They can score 5-6 goals again. They can't do that in the Premier League. And it's going to be very difficult to turn his head away from that sort of thing and keep him at Chelsea, I think.
So do you feel like, sadly, I'm getting the vibes that you feel like Hazard could be bidding us farewell?
I think there's a good chance that part of the reason we're getting Drogba in is to try and stop that happening. But I also think it's going to be futile eventually, because I really think he's going to go at the end of the season.
How disastrous do you think it would be for Chelsea to lose? Because when you have a player like Eden Hazard, a potential Ballon d'Or winner, you build your team around him. It costs a lot of money, and you think, right, this is our man for the next decade, hopefully. To lose him now isn't what happens at Chelsea. We're not a selling club. How disastrous is this for our future aspirations?
I'm not sure I believe that we're not a selling club. I think all clubs these days are selling clubs to some extent. Unless you're Real Madrid and Barcelona, in which case you just buy everyone else's players. But I think FFP made that sort of happen. And you look back, we sold Ian Robin.
That was on our terms.
I was going to say,
though,
apart
wasn't
from Robin, I can't think of a player that we've sold at his peak.
With Robin, but again, on our terms.
On our terms.
On our terms.
Ian Robin less so, I think. Ian Robin wanted to go.
Right.
But of course, the big thing with Hazard is if we get a load of money in for him, and we will be talking enormous amounts of money, I would imagine. What we have to avoid being a Liverpool, being a Spurs, and spending that check on a load of rubbish.
Yes.
And that's the biggest test, I think.
Right. So it's looking like we're going to be Hazardless going into next. Do you think this is a deal that could happen in the summer?
I think it's very unlikely to happen in January. Because the way Real Madrid works with the president and needing to impress fans and things like that, they like to have a big marquee signing in the summer. January, so what? They very rarely need to buy a player in January to shore things up on the domestic front, because they're always okay.
Top
always at the top. Dan, can you see Bale in the summer being maybe part of this deal as in some way? Hazard going one way, Bale coming to us?
There's been a lot of talk about it. I mean, it's difficult to know. It's going to be, at the end of the day, down to the club whether they want to go for one big signing or spend what might be, say, 100 million quid potentially on a load of different players. You could buy half a new team for that if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Alternatively, you could buy one player. I mean, I don't know about you. We have gaps throughout the team, don't we? We have gaps in defence, quite clearly. Terry's not going to go on playing forever.
No. Strikers.
Gaps up front, certainly.
Yeah.
And even in midfield.
So Gareth, if you're listening.
Yeah, but I think Gareth Bale would be a wonderful signing for Chelsea. I think that he's a proven Premier League player and is exactly what we need. And can you imagine going forward with Willian on one wing and being as direct as he is and with his eye for a goal? Bale on the other wing would be a really good side, wouldn't it?
Like destroying the Premier League if he came back.
I think Dan, I'm detecting that you're less keen on this deal.
I wouldn't say I'm
Are you
less keen on it.
are you
I'm
less of a fan of Bale
not
than
at
perhaps?
all. Not at
No.
all. I rate him very highly. But I just wonder whether the will be there to spend all of the money. It won't be. I mean, Hazard will. It won't be. It'll be Bale plus money, if anything, that we would be looking for. I'd imagine.
Wow. Do you really think? Would you say on the market that Hazard is going to be, labelled as a more expensive player than Bale in terms of price
he is.
tags?
I saw something yesterday that Hazard was the third. They weigh everything up. They take into account players' age. They take into account players that the amount of money that they can generate and all things like that.
Yeah.
And Hazard was third, ahead of fourth place Cristiano Ronaldo. In
So
terms
what
of being
was
the most exciting, most expensive player, most valuable player.
He's also got a lot of time left on his contract,
So
which is
who
what
were the
pushes the
top
price
Does that
up.
push it up as
Yeah.
well?
Who were the top three?
Like
Messi, Neymar, and Hazard or something.
I think that's what it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
Messi, Neymar, Hazard, Ronaldo, because Ronaldo's older, so much older. But yeah, I think that's the way that it worked. Dan, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about Drogba. And guys, thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed this strand. And comment below, let us know, are you excited to welcome King Didier back to the bridge?
Didier!
Go on, you Blues.